Okay, Ben, are we ready?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this very exciting session on cyber safety. This is our last session of the day under this Pacific Cyber Dialogue. This session, also like the one before it, is being streamed on the Asia Foundation's YouTube page. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, maybe you're seeing this after the date, or maybe you're watching us live right now. It's exciting. So this session is on cyber safety and vulnerable groups. We have a great moderator here, Anju Mangal, the head of Asia Pacific for the World Wide Web Foundation and A for AI, the Alliance for Affordable Internet. I'm just gonna hand it straight over to Anju and let her take us into the panel.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. Pula, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everyone's well despite the challenges we face today. But I love the fact that despite all the challenges, our Pacific people are resilient and continue to smile. Cyber safety is a very important topic, especially for marginalized and vulnerable groups. We're talking about children, women and girls, people living in rural and remote communities, even LGBTQ groups and persons with disabilities. So when we're talking about vulnerable groups, women and girls face a lot of threats. I'll just give you a bit of stats on the work that we are doing. The Web Foundation and World Association for Girl Guides and Girl Scouts conducted an online survey for around 180 countries, and more than 8,000 people responded to the survey. And the survey clearly states that there is a pandemic of online gender-based violence emerging during COVID-19. And there's increased domestic violence against women witnessed during the crisis, and it's spilling into the online space. And obviously, this is turning the lifeline of the internet into a hostile space. Around 52% of young women and girls that we surveyed said that they experienced online abuse, including threatening messages, sexual harassment, and the sharing of private images without consent. And obviously 87% said that they think that the problem is getting worse. So let's hear from our speakers today. We have an amazing line of speakers who will speak on cyber safety. Let me start by introducing you to the Honorable Minister Siaosi Sovaleni. I would invite him to turn his video on so that everyone can see you. Siaosi Sovaleni, who is no stranger to the Pacific, he is the Minister for Education and Training in Tonga. He was previously the Deputy Prime Minister of Tonga and also the Minister for Climate Change, Environment, Information and Communication. I worked under his leadership in the Pacific community where he was leading the Pacific Regional ICT portfolio. And like I said, he's no stranger. So he was a board member of PICISOC, PECSERT, and currently a board member of Learning. And for those of you who know him, he's also an amazing singer. So let's hope he can sing a song after the session. Also on the panel is my colleague, Miss Dunn-Baleilevuka Dunn. Anne is the Online Safety Commissioner for Online Safety Commission in Fiji, which is under the Ministry of Communications. She is a lawyer by profession and working on cyber law policies and continues to advocate on cyber safety for the people of Fiji. And our final speaker is Miss Rebecca Razavi, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Office of the eSafety Commissioner, Australia's national regulatory and educator for online safety. Ms. Razavi joined eSafety following a 20-year career in public and private sector and has been in management roles in Asia, Africa, Europe, and Australia. She was also a senior diplomat with UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And the full bio of our speakers is available online. I've also added it onto the chat group. So without any further ado, because obviously we're running out of time as well, it's 3:10 now for me. So without any further ado, let me start by asking a few questions. We have decided to keep it free-flowing and conversational style. Feel free to use the Q&A to ask your questions or add your comments because you're all experts. So to the Honorable Minister, Siaosi, who is also a good close friend of mine, perhaps you can talk about your role and responsibility on cyber safety in education. Have you come across any cyber issues in schools? How is your ministry tackling these issues? And do you have any educational programs set up for schools?
Thank you, Anju. I think that introduction pretty much took up most of my time, but I'll touch on a couple of aspects of ICT in education. As a Minister of Education, I'm kind of responsible for running education in Tonga from ECE right up to tertiary. So we have encountered problems at different levels because of the different levels we were actually managing. One of the key, I guess, issues that we need to address is the easy access of the internet these days. You know, it's becoming more affordable. Kids these days, students, actually can have better access than we ever did back in the old days. And then the challenge for us is actually how can we use technology as a tool for development, a tool for learning, and at the same time provide some safety measures to protect some of these kids who are relatively new to technology. And one of those strategies is raising awareness. You know, basically talking to them about it, introducing ICT as a key part of the curriculum of the teachers' training. Because I mean, when they're in school, I do believe that teachers will be their closest friend. And I need my teachers to actually understand what ICT is all about. If they are to actually advise or provide some meaningful contribution to the discussion about safety and about cyber safety, they at least need to understand ICT a little bit more. So we're trying to actually make ICT as an integrated part of the teachers' training. At the same time, we do understand that we're only taking about 6 to 7 hours of the time of these kids. That's when they're still at school. So a lot of the time will be with their families, with their parents back at home. So there's a push to actually try and raise the awareness of the parents themselves to understand and to better advise their kids on the proper etiquettes when you're using the internet. There are certain things that you should do or you can do, and there are certain things that you should not be doing in the internet. I know that's easier said than done. But at least, I mean, if the parents or the brothers and sisters understand a little bit more about ICT, they can better advise some of the kids who are relatively new to ICT. So for us, raising awareness is a big part of cyber safety. The other one is, well, yes, we were actually developing some new bills, computer crimes bill, to try and address some of the new crimes, the crimes that were never anticipated when we drafted up the 2003 computer crimes. So right now we got a bill that we're putting through to Parliament. It's called the Electronic Communication Abuse Offences Bill. Basically addresses cyberbullying, revenge porn, and some of the new, let's just say, offenses in the internet space. Hopefully that will provide some deterrent and also some protection to some of the kids when they're using ICT. Because right now with COVID-19, there's a push to actually provide more online learning or e-learning. And that pushes a lot of the kids towards using ICT. So that basically means, yes, they can use it for e-learning, for learning, but at the same time, they're relatively more vulnerable because there are more kids now using the internet. I'll stop there, Anju, and maybe I can join later on in the discussion. Malo.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm happy that you raised that it's not just about teachers, but also parents and families, because they make up the community, and so everyone needs to have some sort of awareness, and so raising awareness is super key. So going to Anne, there's a pandemic of online gender-based violence, as you know, cyberbullying, online harassment, online crimes and threats, especially during COVID-19. Please tell us the recent work that Online Safety Commission has undertaken to address issues that have arisen this year, emerging both from pandemic and the general upward trend in internet usage in Fiji. What were some of the key takeaways from the past year? and maybe some practical approaches in dealing with complaints. Anne?
Thank you, Anju. Yeah, got you. Thank you so much. Yes, it's the commission was only recently set up, and so operation had started last year, which was such a timely way to set it up. I think as much as we didn't anticipate COVID-19 hitting us in 2020, being able to have a commission that was specifically set up for online safety and for being able to connect with communities was definitely something that helped in this particular situation because everybody went online. And so the focus of the Online Safety Commission in Fiji is really to safeguard Fijians from online abuses, but also a majority of our work lies with working with communities and educating and empowering Fijians to be able to use the internet or to be able to use online platforms safely and responsibly. And so in terms of the transition from last year to this year, last year, a lot of our work revolved around the high schools, majority of which were in the Central Division, as well as the university campuses, which were primarily for the University of the South Pacific, as well as the Fiji National University, which we had a great opportunity to be able to go to the different campuses, particularly for the Fiji National University, or FNU, and do school awarenesses with the university at the various campuses around the country, and that includes the Western Division as well as the Central Division campuses. And so a lot of our work revolved around schools last year, whereas this year there was a bit more engagement with communities, and particularly more rural communities in the country, because it wasn't just focused on the Central Division, but we had the opportunity to reach out to Western Division villages and communities. And this is primarily through the Fiji police officers or community officers, as well as in particular their cybercrime unit, because Fiji Police Cybercrime Unit had already established community outreach programs, which was really helpful to be able to partner with them and have a signed MOU at the beginning of the year that boosted the ability for the commission and the force to be able to work together, at least with outreach programs and reaching out to different communities and being able to get more engagement on the ground level, which was really helpful this year in particular. In terms of the way that we would safeguard Fijians, the commission also has the function of receiving complaints or reports about online abuse. And a majority of that has to, or not a majority, but it's abuse from individuals. And so it's not abuse related to online offenses such as phishing or something that would affect a business instead of an individual. And so for the commission, we've been able to set up set up a complaint scheme and a complaints mechanism where individuals are allowed to call in to, or are able to call into the commission. They can come and physically visit the office, which is at the moment only located in Suva and in the capital of the country, but they can also just go straight to the website, which is www.onlinesafetycommission.com, and they can lodge their reports or their complaints to the commission directly through the website. And so it makes accessibility a little more reachable in terms of reaching out to the commission. And you can, there's also a phone number, a Vodafone number that you could call to reach out to the commission. But something that we found really interesting is the commission is set up to receive complaints based on individuals who are actually affected. And so as much as we were seeing the different trends, a complaint needed to be lodged with the commission in order for the commission to then investigate and assess that particular complaint. And so we did see a trend of image-based abuse in particular, which would be what you referred to earlier as revenge porn. And so it's just this idea that the complaint needs to be made to the commission, which in terms of image-based abuse, the commission has received a number of reports that we classified as image-based abuse. And so they were received by the commission, they were assessed, and then they were legally analyzed, and then it was referred to Fiji police as the enforcement body. And so the commission has certain powers, but it does not have an enforcement power at the moment. And so there are ways to counteract online abuses, but one of the things that we are able to do is serve a notice of removal and seize with that particular type of electronic communication to certain individuals, should we find them be sort of in offense with the particular act or with a particular online abuse. And so we've also served notices throughout last year and this year to individuals who were either posting online of content that was abusing an individual who lodged a complaint, or if it was images and the threats of images of a particular intimate partner, which we found a majority being women and girls. And so just a little bit of statistics in terms of last year and this year. Last year, 67% of our complainants were women and girls, and that still takes the majority this year with 63% of the reports that we were receiving. And in 2020 alone, we received more than 400 reports or complaints to the commission, and that ranges from content about online bullying to mostly defamatory comments and posts that people were able to delete or remove right away. But it also includes more harmful content, such as image-based abuse, such as sexual harassment, and even we had a few content that were not on social media platforms, but it was just via text messages and emails in terms of the threat of sharing intimate images. What we found, though, is that only 3% of our complainants were 18 and under. And all of those reports were then referred to Fiji Police and the Child Services for our Ministry of Women. And the majority of our complaints were received from the Central and Western Division, with 56% being received from the Central Division. And so a lot of our education, or a lot of our awareness and empowerment of Fijians, is drilled or more aimed towards the Western and Central Division of the country. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now, and then I'll get into more specific detail when asked.
I'm glad that you have a complaints mechanism in place, and obviously you are also reaching out to the rural and remote communities, which is one of the most vulnerable groups because they don't necessarily get awareness, and obviously they're not part of outreach programs. So I'm happy that you're actually engaging them and looking at outreach awareness programs. So I'm going to now turn to Rebecca. The Safety Commission in Australia has been doing amazing initiatives to tackle cyberbullying, online violence against women and children, and obviously online harassment. Maybe you could highlight the main pillars of eSafety work, and also describe how the Office of the eSafety Commissioner has engaged with our Pacific neighbors, and how do you see some of the principles being developed by your team applied in the Pacific context?
Thanks, Anju, and hello everyone. And thanks so much to Commissioner Dunn and Minister Siaosi. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to come together in a kind of format like this, because I guess my observation from listening to those opening remarks from everyone is how much cross-learning, can happen and needs to happen, and how much we kind of learn off each other. I feel like in some ways, with Australia starting our eSafety Commission 5 years ago, we just had our 5th birthday this year. It's just been a kind of massive roller coaster of learning. And I was observing just a couple of points that were made by the others, that this is a constantly evolving space. So we're always feeling like we're putting in place new mechanisms which we're needing to kind of constantly iterate and evolve. And that learning that we do together is really critical. But we're set up really with kind of 3 pillars. One of which is our kind of prevention work. So very much along the theme that the Minister mentioned initially around awareness raising, whether that's in schools or with educators, whether that's absolutely kind of with parents, wider family. This year we issued our first grandparents guide, for example. And of course, kind of those other parts of that sort of ecosystem of supporting children, but other vulnerable people out in the community. So whether that's frontline workers and others, really having a kind of awareness and capacity raising program for them. And then we have our sort of protection pillar, which is really similar to what the Commissioner was just describing in terms of having investigatory capacity to deal with reports coming in. And we've got 3 components to that. So one is around the image-based abuse and removal of content and our kind of civil powers around content removal. One is around cyberbullying and support for children in that context. And the other is around more abhorrent and violent material and content removal in relation to that. So that's really to do with removal of predominantly for us in that capacity, child sexual abuse material. So that's the sort of those pillars of action. The third pillar is really around what we call kind of proactive change. So that's really, again, to this theme of sort of thinking ahead of what's coming next, because it's this sort of constantly evolving space. And it's really where our citizens are engaging. That's when we start to see what kind of harms, what kind of behaviors evolve and emerge over time. And this is very much sort of part of a wider ecosystem where we have, I guess, those kind of wider actors and industry itself, of course, critical, and the tech platforms themselves critical to that. But as new things emerge, and to sort of give you an example of things we're looking at right now in terms of, say, issues around artificial intelligence or facial recognition, these sorts of issues that we're constantly trying to kind of think about and bring out some thought leadership pieces to begin to, I guess, understand better what kind of harms might be arising in those contexts and how we might need to collectively begin to address them. And one of those themes that we've been very active on is working on something called safety by design, which is really thinking about this concept that, in the same way we think about road safety, I guess, we have both the vehicles and then we have the roads. Well, those that are putting the roads and the vehicles in place need to make sure that those safety features are designed in from the beginning, so that the users are safe in that capacity, whether that's the sort of seatbelts and airbags or the guardrails on the road. And so safety by design for us in this online safety concept is really to sort of think about and help industry think about and work through how are you really designing from, literally sort of top to bottom in terms of governance, investment, and all those other aspects that you need to think of in design, let alone the kind of actual digital design. How are you featuring the safety of users and factoring that into the design of your products? So that's the sort of sphere of our work. And maybe just to give you a little flavor, in the 5 years that we've been functioning, we've dealt with nearly 70,000 reports of prohibited content. I mentioned the majority of that content has been related to child sexual abuse material. And we've made over 40,000 notifications in the context of a global network, and we work through InHope, as I know other countries do as well. And we've had more than 2,000 cases of cyberbullying that we've investigated and supported resolution to. And we've assisted over 4,800 victims of image-based abuse. And I think similar to the trend that others have observed, and as you mentioned, Anju, in your introduction, there's absolutely been an increase in these behaviours occurring. The more people have been online, the more we've seen increase in reports coming into our investigations branch. So maybe just to say a little bit about your last question, which was, how we engaging perhaps in our region and elsewhere. I mean, we absolutely see this connectivity across our region, our neighborhood first, and then of course globally, because the internet doesn't have borders, not really. So that's really, we see it sort of fundamental to us all being able to serve our citizens, is actually being able to work together. Now, of course, this is going to have a different sort of flavor, whichever culture and community we're in. And I was really interested to hear the Commissioner mentioned the kind of granularity in terms of thinking about the communities, the rural communities versus the central communities, and the differentiation there. And it's absolutely, you need that level of granularity, but there are, I guess, these sort of principles that we observe, and I can see others observing, that we definitely, can share and learn from. And some of those are around thinking about, I guess, some of these normative issues like digital ethics, digital governance, and just sort of approaches to digital regulation. And some of it's very practical kind of experience sharing. So as I mentioned, this is a journey and continues to be one. As we put in place these schemes, I can see the Commissioner smiling. You learn a lot as you go along, and it's really definitely part of our ethos to want to share that learning as other entities around the world consider this, or as new legislation's coming forward. And I know what's going to be coming forward in Tonga, and actually, I'm sort of calling this our 5th birthday year present, but we are anticipating to get another iteration of our Online Safety Act coming in the next year. So yeah, it's really about, I guess, sharing that the sort of best practice and sharing some resources. This year during COVID, we launched some kind of global advice packs to share some of the kind of learning resources that we've developed. One was online safety advice for parents and carers, and a sort of pack of resources in relation to that. One was in relation to online safety advice for frontline workers supporting women, because as you've already identified, of course, we know that women are disproportionately represented in terms of online harms. And similar to Commissioner Dunn, we've seen, in terms of home-based abuse, for example, disproportionately affecting women. But also other vulnerable communities as well. And we provide specific resource pack for advice for online safety for young children and parents and carers, and some resources for that as well. So, we're really looking forward to next year in terms of trying to provide some other resources to sort of share some of our learning in terms of how we've set up and some of the things we've trialed.
Great, thank you so much. For Pacific governments that don't have these resources, they can also reach out to Rebecca, and obviously to Anne. And I like the fact that you also mentioned that it's also important to raise awareness, and education is not just about one person, but it's a multi-stakeholder ecosystem-based approach. So I like that. And I also like the fact that you mentioned that there's also a grandparent's guide. You might have to send that to me, because it's really difficult for me to also teach my grandfather how to use WhatsApp or video calls. So going back to Siaosi, in terms of policies, how can we engage the Pacific governments that are not thinking about online safety or cyber safety? And what would be your advice as a minister to small island states, particularly around developing holistic policies that reflect teaching practices and strategies around online safety? You're on mute.
It's usually much better if we have a clean slate. I mean, like for most small island countries, they're starting pretty much like very near. And to actually take into account cyber safety issues and cybersecurity issues at that early age, I do believe will be very beneficial. And then I think back when we were in SPC, I think that's one of the key messages that we were trying to actually get to the Pacific Islands, is to actually, it might be considered disadvantage that you're starting on e-government or e-commerce and so forth, but it can be an advantage because you learn from others, learn from their mistakes. And so you build in the security aspect, the safety aspect from the ground up, rather than actually trying to put it on an ad hoc kind of basis. So there's some advantage to actually being late to the game. But at the same time, I do believe what the other two ladies were saying, especially about a more holistic approach to cyber safety. There's no silver bullet. There have to be a multi-pronged approach to try to ensure that the net is a little bit safer, especially for the students, especially for the kids. Now they're more curious about the internet, about Facebook, about TikTok, and so forth. So we have to be very active in actually putting measures in place. There's some discussion, especially with telecom, about possible opt-out options. When they're selling their internet packages, they put in protective measures, and then you can opt out of it if need be. But sometimes parents will just buy a package without knowing that it's still very much open. Kids can log in and pretty much can go anywhere. But if you put in some protective mechanism as a default, when they buy the package, then the parents can, or whoever bought the package can opt out of that particular restrictions later on, rather than exposing the kids to some of the not so nice things in the internet. So there are measures in place, and I believe sharing like this discussion between people who have had that experience or have the expertise can actually help a lot of our Pacific Island countries who are still developing, who are still pretty new to the cyberspace, and having some continuing talanoa or discussion sessions about the challenges that we face, because I'm pretty sure that what we face here in Tonga is not unique to Tonga, and if we can actually share some of our experience with our other brothers and sisters in the other Pacific Island countries, I believe that will be very beneficial. You don't have to go through the pain. If someone else went through it and decide to share and how to actually go around it, so much better. So maybe continue having this kind of discussion on a more regular sessions, and actually having a forum for sharing some of our experience, and having people like Rebecca and Nena sharing their expertise. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we have a computer emergency response team, the Tonga said, who are, yes, they're dealing with cybersecurity, but they can also help out with cyber safety issues. So establishing a body like that will also help some of our Pacific Island countries. They are setting up a set. I know we've been working on it for a while. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the Tonga set will love to help any other countries who want to establish a computer emergency response team. I'll stop there, Anju, and let the other join in. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Siaosi. And again, you mentioned holistic approach, multi-stakeholder approach, but I like the fact that you mentioned that working with telcos to put in measures in place and having that opt-out option is key. But also, I think telcos need to make some sort of awareness programs, and so people understand, especially parents who are always giving the phones to their kids. So coming to Rebecca and Anne, going back to the survey we did, 51% of those who experienced online abuse said that it affected their emotional and physical well-being. There's mental and emotional stigma on the online space, especially for kids with disabilities, or even persons with disabilities who are constantly being harassed online. And this can lead to self-harm, depression, and even suicide. I mean, we've had some cases in the Pacific itself. So what would be some of the approaches and strategies in protecting these vulnerable groups that sometimes they don't have that awareness? So what are the mechanisms in place? How can they reach out to you? Or what would be some ways that we can help them? So we'll start with Anne and then Rebecca.
Thank you, Anju. Yes, it's really good. That's a really good question, because what we're finding initially with the Online Safety Commission is that while we go out to communities, in terms of the reports that we're receiving and the complaints that we receive, our average age is 34 years old. Our average, or not average complainant, but our complainant is usually a woman, is usually a girl. And so what we're finding is that as we go into communities, whether rural or in the Central Division, a lot more younger complaints come in, and a lot more younger people will lodge their complaints with the commission. And even those who, or people with persons with disabilities, will also inquire of how our services can really affect them as well. And one of the examples that came to light was, especially during the COVID-19 period, we had government who had done a really good job with having interpreters on the screen when they made announcements. And unfortunately, one of the things that took place online was sort of an harassment towards a particular interpreter. And so it was really interesting to see how that dynamic would flow, because a lot had to come from educating or empowering Fijians to really use the space responsibly, to be able to use the digital spaces in a safe manner. But I think it also goes back to just being able to educate at those different levels. So whether it's vulnerable groups of persons with disabilities, whether it's younger Fijians or children and teenagers, or whether it's the LGBTQ community, and however that relates to, however online safety will relate to those individual groups. We've really tried to reach out to different groups. We've had working groups with the Commission that has involved different stakeholders from different NGOs, different CSOs, and even individual groups throughout the communities, including the LGBT community, including women's rights communities. And so having the different working groups to be able to establish sort of a more collective approach and a more holistic approach that we keep hearing about in this session, because it's really important to recognize that online safety is not just the work of an individual institution or an individual person. It's really a collective effort of everybody that's on this space, because as much as we could protect it, there needs to be some accountability of how we use it as end users and as individuals who use the platforms, who use the internet in a variety of ways. But it's just this interesting scape or landscape to be in, because engaging with vulnerable communities also gives us an opportunity to see that the different online abuses also affect the communities in a particular way. For instance, you had spoken of women and girls, and really how that's affecting their mental health. We found that in one instance, we had a complainant who was older who was in her 40s, and she had lodged a report particular to image-based abuse that was here regarding an intimate partner, a former intimate partner. And unfortunately, the Commission is not at a place to extend the function of counseling services. And so we've had to refer her to other counseling service and readily available counseling services in the country. And so you have different counseling services, particular to women. You have FWCC, you have the crisis centers across the country. You have Lifeline Fiji, which is also a great space for mental health, and just being able to discuss with somebody who was experienced and practiced in terms of dealing with mental health, and really having a conversation about how online abuse has affected you. But at this moment, the Commission is only functioning to receive the complaint and deal with it at in a more civil way, and approach it with remedies that could resolve the issue right then and there, such as removing the content from the online space and really serving a notice to the individual if we know who the person is that's being alleged to produce this content. But we're definitely open to the different groups being able to access the Commission. And that's also available on the website. It's also available on the Facebook page. Sorry, that was a really long answer to that question, but I hope that answered that question.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. And would you, Rebecca, would you like to respond as well?
Thanks, Anju. Yeah, I mean, we've very similar observations from our perspective as well. And actually, this has been a particular theme for us this year. And we released a recent statement called Protecting Voices at Risk Online, which sort of came out the back of a kind of year of research and analysis. And some particular research that we brought out that looked at, I guess, what we might call this intersectionality on this kind of confluence of harms that can occur when you have kind of different vulnerabilities layered on each other, and the kind of risks of harm that you see there. But it was really clear, I think, similar to the comment we just heard, that some of these harms are very, very specific, and some of these communities are not, perhaps not as proactive as one might hope in sort of coming to seek help and support. So we recognise we've really got to try and raise very specific awareness and understand what some of the barriers are at a more granular level to why that is. So we've been attempting, I think, through a number of ways, and this is ongoing work, to reach more deeply into specific vulnerable communities, whether that's people living with disabilities, or whether that's the LGBTQI community, or whether it's in the Australian context, our Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islanders, who, all of those groups are experiencing very specific and more intense harms. Some of it we realise is very it's sort of intra-community harms, and there's some really interesting kind of learnings and observations that is coming out now of our kind of more granular level consultation at that community level to understand why that is, what kind of education resources might help in these particular contexts, because they're so different. We have a grants program that's underway at the moment, which is specifically looking at support for particularly kind of women and children in the context of Indigenous Torres Strait Islander communities. But again, all of these we're trying to design and co-design at the community level. And there's no, I think the Minister mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet for any of this, but I think just this step in the recognition that each of these communities has very specific needs and concerns, and as a sort of citizen service, we need to be really alive to that and working closely with them to try to kind of understand better what their kind of needs and target our resources more specifically. But just one thing that we realized we needed to do, which was educate ourselves better as an institution and all of our staff working on these issues, so that we recognize that diversity, and that we're sort of trying to be really conscious of that in the way we're designing programs and talking about issues and making our kind of plans for engagement.
I forget that I'm always mute. It's good that you all mention again, in terms of, dealing with this issue is, again, we need a multi-stakeholder approach, and obviously involving not just one sector, but all the different sectors, particularly the people that are already working on some of these issues, that's like domestic violence. I mean, they can also be involved in this, and also people like Empower Pacific, they can provide some sort of support when there is a situation where someone is depressed or is suicidal. So I think this is really good that we have these agents available to assist. I'm now going on to the quick Q&A, and I do see one question which is on the chat forum. I also please welcome everyone to use the Q&A forum to ask your question. But the first question is for Anne. We have had a very high profile case in the local media in Fiji involving cyberbullying by a school teacher of a prominent female politician. The teacher has since been terminated, but only after the politician lodged a complaint to the police after months of harassment on social media. Did the commission play any role at all in addressing the harassment? If so, exactly what? And this question is from Milika Sobe. Thank you. And
thank you for that question to Milika. And it's a really good question. Yes, we had initially received a report as well from the woman honorable MP who was affected by the online bullying, and so her complaint had come in mostly after a lot of the media had taken hold of the complaint, and so we were able to retrieve a lot of the links and a lot of the content that was being complained about or reported about, and successfully reporting them to the social media content for removal, which was really helpful. And so a lot of that content was able to be removed, particularly to the different videos that were uploaded. And some of the content that dated back a few months were also shared with or sent and given to the social media platform to be removed immediately, which was helpful just in terms of what content was available. So that was one of the ways that the commission had taken part, because once the Honorable MP had lodged her complaint with the commission, she had also opted to withdraw her complaint, which is an option for any complainant, and just leave it with Fiji police as well.
Great, thank you so much for the response. Is there any other question, Q&A? Feel free to ask any question. Otherwise, if you don't have any question, I'll continue the conversation. So coming back to the Honorable Minister and Rebecca, what do you expect to be working in the future? Maybe some priority areas for your organization, or maybe community outreach program. Maybe you can tell us or the audience what we need to look out for in the coming months, and how can we engage with you?
Well, for me, Anju, the government will be tabling the Electronic Communication Abuse Offences Bill next week. So that's going to be interesting. We believe it's timely that well, it's late, but at least it's there now for discussion and hopefully accepted, endorsed by Parliament. At the same time, we were scheduling a training program for our teachers on ICT. Now the school is off, we're looking at actually running a few ICT programs for teachers. As I mentioned earlier on, we believe they not only for administrative tasks, but also to understand the challenges that we face, all the kids face about ICT. And that will be coming in the next couple of months, hopefully in preparation for the next academic year. I'll just leave it with those two. I think that will keep me occupied for a while.
Yes, that's going to be a lot of work. So thank you for that. Anne?
So we're really looking to empower and educate a lot more Fijians. And so a lot of our project, or a lot of our priorities, is focused towards educating and empowering through the community awareness programs. And so we just recently joined the Ministry of Women with their REACH program, and we're currently going through a REACH campaign, which is involving of different stakeholders who are going out to different communities. And so at the moment we're in the central or Suvat and Navua corridor with the REACH program. And so going out to different communities and just being able to provide the services of the commission in terms of lodging reports, or even just advising and being able to educate on how to use the digital platforms a little bit more safer, particularly in terms of how we could be proactive, because what we're finding is that a lot of times we're just going onto these platforms, as much as accessibility has really improved throughout the country, as much as prices for being able to access the internet or being able to get mobile data is at probably its lowest cost at the moment. We're finding that accessibility is there, but it's just being able to be wise and have digital sort of clarity of cyber hygiene and being able to protect ourselves online is the thing that we're finding a lot more to do in terms of how we engage with communities. There's also an opportunity of working with Get Safe Online, which we've been doing for a few months now, which is a great NGO from the UK. And I did want to mention that earlier this year, when Rebecca was mentioning the sharing of information, the Commission had also spent Safer Internet Day 2020 at the Office of the eSafety Commissioner in Australia. So that was a great opportunity, particularly before COVID-19 had hit the country or even the region, because it was really unique to learn from the first institution or the first commissioner, not the first commissioner herself, but just the first institution to be set up, particularly for eSafety in the world. And so it was great to participate and learn from the experiences of the Commission in Australia, and continue to dialogue throughout the year, which has been really helpful. And so the other projects that we're also looking into and are currently involved in is one with Save the Children Fiji, which is primarily about digital literacy. And that's a work that's being done with Facebook Pacific, which is really good in terms of raising digital literacy and raising awareness on that landscape, because a majority of the issues that are being reported about range from things of using fake online profiles or engaging with fake profiles to even defamatory comments and posts. But we are realizing that when individuals report of engaging with fake profiles or fake user accounts online, or even if they are being impersonated online, they've already had the conversation with the user profile. And so they'll come to the commission after, or they'll lodge a report with their police post after the fact, when really a lot more education could be done from our end as well, just in terms of blocking and removing content when you're able to, because the social media platforms themselves provide sort of the proactive measures that somebody could take before getting into a space of online abuse. But that's a majority of the work that we're looking forward to. Naka.
Great, thank you so much. And those are really interesting and great initiatives. So all the Fiji team, I hope you are aware of this, and please get in touch with Anne if you need more information. Rebecca, over to you.
Like Tonga is facing, we're also going to have new legislation on the horizon, which will be a big feature for us in the coming year. Mentioned our safety by design work, but we'll have another iteration of that, including a kind of framework of guidance and resources to assist with industry, whether that's the kind of mid and top tier or the sort of startup community, to really start to embed their own self-assessments around their safety components. We will also have some more, I mentioned on the sort of tech trends front, some more sort of think pieces out, if you like, thought leadership pieces out around some of the new technologies that we're seeing. And just in response to the comment from Anne, we're really looking forward to working more with you. More widely, we're working with the Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade here in Australia and their cyber engagement program, the Pacific, and really hoping to do kind of more regional engagement through that as well. And I mentioned we're hoping to have what we're calling a sort of regulation and investigations guide to be able to sort of share a bit more widely some of our experience and thoughts around how others might want to might want to think about in terms of setting up their own approach. And I hope, we'll just continue to strengthen this kind of network of commissioners or equivalent, particularly through our region.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm glad that there's so many initiatives and obviously resources available for the Pacific Islanders. So this doesn't stop here. Obviously, we can reach out to you if we need information. I don't see any more question and answer, and I think we've come to an end. 2 minutes, I'll give 2 minutes basically to wrap up. So in terms of what they mentioned was that we need, Siaosi mentioned online discussion. So please use PICI Soccer, which is the Pacific Islands chapter of the Internet Society, to continue these discussions, because it should not end here. And we've got all these great initiatives. So get in touch with the great resource people that have, and the speakers here. And I would also like to advise everyone that, you need facts and evidence-based research. So if you could do more research before reaching out to the communities and doing outreach is very important. And of course, working with telcos and raising awareness. And raising awareness is not just for me, it's about you. So cyber safety is for you, it matters. And it's for your mom, if it's for your dad, it's for your kids, it's for your grandparents. So please get them involved. Talk to them continuously, and also to talk to your government stakeholders and also communities. So on that note, I'd just like to thank our panel of speakers. Thank you so much. And like I said, we will continue this discussion. And now I would like to hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Anju. So big thank you to all of our speakers and panelists in this session. I think it was a really great discussion. And especially big thank you to Anju for moderating it so ably and allowing us to have such a great interaction here. So this is the last session of the day for our conference. We'll be starting again tomorrow in the afternoon PNG time at about 3:45. We'll have 2 sessions tomorrow. I hope you'll all come back. They're going to be really interesting ones. The first one on government organization for managing cyber risk. We'll have representatives from governments of Vanuatu, the US, and Papua New Guinea, as well as somebody from FireEye. And then after that, we're going to have a more casual closing discussion with anybody who would like to join. It'll be facilitated by Mika Kertunen from the Cyber Policy Institute in Finland. So thanks, everybody. Hope to see you again tomorrow, and good night.
Ben, are we allowed to have a photo session? Oh, Siaosi has left. Maybe with Anne and Rebecca.
Sure.
Anne, Rebecca?